The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. I want to just say to everyone, welcome to the new year. Hopefully everything is looking up and bright for you, and that you're ready for a great year of Agile practices and transformation, or whatever you're focused on within your business, or you're a developer, doing technical practices, whatever that might be. We are sponsored by the Agile Alliance. If you're not familiar with who the Agile Alliance is, go visit them. They're at agilealliance.org. They're the ones who help to pay for things like the webinar system and other things for us, giving us the space in order to have these conversations. If you're not a member, it's a nonprofit. I think it's worth the dollars, especially with all of the different member events that they have and the discount programs that they have for things like going to like Agile 2022, whatever your preference is. It's a great community. I believe that it's also a very inclusive community of people that if you want to get together, have a conversation on something. The one thing I find with the Agile community is that they always make space for you. They always give you the room to ask your questions, and that sort of bleeds off into things like the Agile Coaching Network. I'm joined with a cast of regulars. Today, it looks like we have Shauna, Jorg, and Hendrik here with me today. Diana, she is out today. Unfortunately, she's got some stuff she has to take care of, and hopefully she'll be with us next month. To kick things off, I had a conversation with one of the Agile Manifesto authors, and this was an online conversation that I had with him. And specifically, the gentleman, Ron Jeffries, if you know him, he's been teaching a lot of technical practices over the years. I've had the pleasure of seeing him at events, also sitting down and having some great conversations with him about what was the original intent of the Agile Manifesto. He was one of the authors of it. But the conversation that he had was focused more towards this open letter that he kind of put out and pointed that towards both, the Scrum Alliance and other trade associations like the Agile Alliance, the people who are certifying SAFe consultants. And he was really focused on a couple of things in here, which I think is important for us to talk about. He was thinking that, from an Agile coach's perspective or from a Scrum perspective, are they thriving, are they surviving, or are they on the decline with the approach that they're taking within their companies using a Scrum framework or other frameworks? And his belief, of course, is because he's always been very helpful about helping people to do better. His belief over the last 20 years is that we should see Agile teams moving up the scale, moving towards thriving. And as a coach, that's ultimately our goal. We want to be able to remove ourselves from the coaching realm of a particular team because they're thriving and they know enough about Scrum, they can start teaching Scrum to others just as well as the Agile coach could. And coaches then start to go work on other areas besides just teaching them the basics of what Scrum is. What Ron was pointing out was that after 20 years, he sees the trend of, yes, there are some teams that go off and thrive. He was noticing that there were some, and a good chunk of them that he has exposure to, were not thriving. And he was asking that question of why weren't these teams thriving? His last point was, as he looked at the landscape, there are millions of people that have been certified, a million. And that's a kind of an interesting number, because to think that of a million, why are many not thriving? What are we in the coaching community? What are we not doing well? What are we not addressing? Trying to go enable these people to be successful. What are things that we could do to do that better? So with that, to kick off the conversation, I'd like to, look at this and frame this in a couple different ways. One, which is, how are they failing? What are the failing things that you're doing? The people who are in that thriving phase, what did you do to potentially not go down that road? And then how can we do better? How can we actually turn this into a situation where everyone is thriving in this case? So with that, to kick that off, Shauna, do you want to kick off our conversation today?
Yeah, so I think this is a great topic, especially as we, when we're looking inward into our teams and we're helping them succeed. I think that what we don't do a lot of is focus on how to alleviate some of the outside pressures that might be affecting a team. So a lot of times when I see the decline or teams really struggling, it has a lot to do with mental space and the ability to focus on how they want to solve the problem or giving the problem back to the team. A lot of times it's like we have stakeholders who are giving the teams timelines and why are you working on things this way? Why aren't you doing that way? And so we see a lot of external pressures coming in where we're not helping the teams be set up for success. I think in my experience, that's one of the big issues is that you don't have that external support to help the teams thrive. I think number two, lack of clear understanding of working agreements or how the team is going to operate together is also another big downfall. I see, so, you talked about the Agile coach, whether it's called Scrum Master, Delivery Manager. One of the things is, if a team is not thriving, there's like, isn't this the product manager's job? Isn't this the tech lead's job? And there's a lot of inward kind of focus on who should be doing what and instead of coming together. And so those are kind of the two things is how do we get our external players at B to have agreement on the way that the team is working and give the team time to solve the problem. And number two, ensure that the team sort of understands who's responsible for what decisions or things, artifacts that they're working through, so that when pressure does get tight, that the team doesn't start sort of falling over. So those are my observations.
So just to give you a follow-on question with this, and specifically in your company, what do you find, when we enable coaches? And there was a couple of questions that came up on the Q&A here about, we send them off to certification, and then as a manager, we might feel that is enough. Well, you've got your certification, now you should know. So therefore, my job is done. You think that's...
Yeah. So the problem with certification is that in my mind, that means that there's a one-size-fits-all approach to every team. And every team, kind of how you were showing in that previous picture, is very different on their journey and where they're at. And so, the needs of the team change, and sort of the tools or the things in order to help that team thrive change. And there's not a one-size-fits-all. So I think that while the certification or the training helps people sort of understand the why between why certain things are done or why certain practices are put in place, the implementation of that or how the team works through getting those things, sort of embedded on their teams is not a one size fits all.
Okay. Jorg, what about you? And by the way, Happy New Year, Jorg.
Happy New Year. Yeah, I think there are two things that popped into my mind when I saw that distinction. I think it's a cycle in a way for every team. We're never constant. We're never in perfect team health or personal happiness all the time. So we're probably fluctuating, and different people would answer this probably slightly different tomorrow. Without nothing much changing on the really measurable side. And I think it's a different skill of doing the things right versus having the energy, putting the energy into the team to keep the change going, because we as humans always want to do the next thing. So if a methodology settles, there is already the need to unsettle it. Otherwise it gets boring, slow, and that's not what automatically everybody does. So you need to have somebody bringing that energy into the team. And if it's only the coach who does this, then there is the continuation of the energy for some time, then there is proficiency, and then the motion gets slower and slower. And I think bring your bench, people that can take over, that can do this kind of being interested in the results, being interested in the progress, and seeing that there is something beyond what the team is currently doing. I've seen it a lot when starting with teams. They already feel they've achieved so much. They get a feeling of satisfaction. And if this predominates the team effort, there is very little incentive to learn until they are dissatisfied and then maybe already declining.
Sure, I agree with that. One other thing to just kind of in contrast to that, when you say bring in other people, I remember when we first met.
Enable other people is probably what I meant.
Well, enable is a good word. Yeah, I remember that, I flew to Germany. Was it Germany that I went to when we first met?
It was.
Yeah, and so you brought in some outsiders, and I remember having lots of great conversations about your Agile adoption and what you were trying to do and all of that stuff. So my question, I guess, is that, the outsiders that you're bringing in, how does that benefit and help a team to do better?
It broadens their view of what is possible in the world. It fertilizes the idea space that they have. It makes them curious and offers them a perspective that this is not just one coach telling me how to do this in two ways. First, coach isn't always right. So there are other perspectives, people who are telling me a matching thing, but in a different way. So if I'm not comfortable with something, probably I'm not getting the matching way to formulate it or to do it, instead of just feeling that I didn't get it. It's not school where you get a formula, you put the numbers in, and the result is X, and X is only right or wrong. And noticing that you can do things and not only the coach can, is much easier if you see your coach already picking things up from somebody else in that conversation, like I picked up things from you. And having that experience, the guy who's teaching me is as well learning. That opens up a totally different way of approaching it for the people who want to do it. That's a good way to find the people who want to keep that learning dynamic alive.
Sure. Hendrik, how about you? What do you have on this?
I think when we look at the organizations that are on the decline or who do not manage to really grow and thrive, a common pattern that I've seen a lot is a lack of empowerment and still keeping the illusion of control in some way. So it's often the ecosystem around the teams that is not really becoming agile. And that's, of course, a big problem. I know also in many companies. Wherever I've seen that the management, the surrounding organizations were starting to embrace, at least to some extent, that the world is uncertain, and if we cannot plan, then at least we can prepare. And how do we prepare for things? If an organization fails to do that, they are usually not growing or declining. Now, we need to also look at, because you're pointing at that, what's the role of the coach, and why, when we have all these coaches, why are we not shaking up the organizations and empowering people and embracing change? And I think, first of all, good coaches are really hard to find. I've been recruiting coaches for many years, and it's really quite a process until you find a person where you believe, okay, this is a person who can really do something. And there is certain things I'm looking for when I want to find a good coach. And first of all, a Scrum Master is just, for me, that's one stance that you can take towards a team. And then you're the process expert, if you will, and you try to help the team master Scrum. But for me, an Agile coach is much more than that. It's a person who's not only like teaching Scrum and so on, and helping the people to practice Scrum. But for me, it's also a person that is seeing the team's needs. I think Shauna was pointing to that as well. Somebody who's really coaching, seeing people's needs, teams' needs, being able to see how can we satisfy the needs, helping a team to either create a crisis and that help the team grow, or survive a crisis, get out of it. It's a sparring partner, it's an advisor, a mentor. All of that is what makes a really good coach, that you do the right thing in the right moment. Another important, I think, characteristics of a good coach is it is a person who sees people and who's able to challenge people and teams and organizations in a really good way. So the best coaches I know, they can challenge you. You really feel almost annoyed, but you really see, my God, I really have a way to grow, and they help you doing that. And those are people who can do this also towards management. And yeah, this is really a skill to challenge teams and people in such a constructive way that they really get growing and not taking things out of their hands. So those were a couple of thoughts I have around the thing, how to really get to the thriving mode. And then I agree to a lot of the stuff that has been said by the others.
So in your company culture, and I was just thinking about the type of person you were talking about. One, it just sounds to me that you have a lot of, as a coach within your organization, you have a lot of safety, meaning that in order to speak truth to power, ability to coach and mentor and do it from a safe place. Would you say that as a whole that your company does that well? Does it position the people in that space?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I have, of course, the luxury to work in a Swedish company, and my experience in this company is that it is relatively safe when I compare this to other companies. So in my whole career, and I'm now, how long am I here? 27 years or something like this. So it feels like forever. I have never felt that something is hitting back on me when I take initiative or make suggestions or when I confront people with things. Of course, I have been in unpleasant and difficult situations. That's of course happening, but generally people can speak up in this company. And that's a very, very important thing. The safe environment is, psychological safety is a super big ingredient to thriving.
Right, and I was just thinking that even the way that Ron had originally, how he voiced this with, you are doing this wrong, and I and I think of it from the terms of, if somebody ever points at me and says you're doing it wrong, what does those words do to you?
I mean, that is super bad when you say you're doing it wrong. I mean, I really think I've met nobody who comes to work in the morning saying, today I'm going to screw up the company because it's just great to screw up everything. People come in and they want to do a good job. And then the question is, are they empowered? Do they have the education? Do they have the mastery to do their job? Do they have all the cards in their hand so they can play the game in a good way? Those are things that matter much, much more. So if something is not performing, it can be that a person does not yet have the mastery or the competence to do the job. So we need to work on that. So yeah, so it's not, I don't see this really as a personal thing too much.
Right. So in other words, be cautious with some of the words that you use. I think also the question of empathy, which I think empathy is one of those gateway, it's the gateway thing to empowerment, which is, I need to, as a person who is watching over agile coaches within a company, because I've done that role many times where I had coaches working for me, or I was helping with the corporate transformation work as a senior manager, and it was my responsibility to make sure that these people were okay. And I think that empathy that we lead with is important, because we do need to have a support network for those people to thrive. They can't just, I used to think that agile transformation coach of a company is one of the loneliest jobs I've ever had, because it's like I needed to reach into industry and find peers so that I can have conversations with them and reflect things, and occasionally just even vent about some of the things that are going on. You know.
Yeah. Agile chapters are very often self-help groups as well.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see, Joseph, you've had your hand up for a little bit. What do you have on this topic?
I raised my hand at the very beginning, and I think Hendrik actually spoke some of my words, but I wanted to check base with the rest of the audience on this one. So I work as a consultant going into different companies, and my observation, what I've seen is it seems to go back to Hendrik's, is that where I see companies or teams thriving is where they're supported by leadership, where leadership is not only wants to get better, but they're also empowering the teams to get better and helping them and giving them the safety to do it. Where I've gone into companies or organizations that are either surviving or declining, it's because the leadership is saying the right words, but their actions don't actually align with that. And I've assumed that what I've seen is correct, but I'm oftentimes been known to project. So I wanted to get others' thoughts on that. Am I projecting, or are you guys seeing the same thing out there?
Shauna, do you think that we have projection going on?
I have a strong view. Maybe go over to Jorg.
What I think is that there definitely differences. There are organizations that really support or that have a culture of are master of your own work in a certain way, and I can relate to the Scandinavian approach that Hendrik mentioned. It's true for other Scandinavian companies as well, that they really see the manager always as the helping hand of the employee to get the work done. And if you start with this, then empowerment is easier. That is definitely true. But I think it's not all us, the leadership, to make something, but show them what helps and then get their support. And I think a lot of company cultures don't do this. They say, you must help me, you must find this, you are on top, you are the smarter person. And we very often don't break this hierarchy rule early enough so that the teams go up and show what they have and say, if you give me this, I'll return something to you that is more productivity, greater foresight, whatever. Instead, they go to where they can go because their direct manager is still interested in a way, and then they stop.
Sure.
And it's not really fair than just simply call on management to solve it. It's nice if they do, but if they don't, in a lot of companies, there is a way to get at least part of this solved actively.
Just to build off that, thank you for stating that. I think that it's really like I see the leadership team as facilitators and being able to facilitate the right conversations. So if it is being projected on the leaders, I feel like it's up to them to kind of create the space and ensure that the leadership is bringing in the right people, and allow the other folks' voices to be heard that maybe otherwise aren't known in the organization. Or, you know, it's really important, I think, for the leadership to allow that space, because I think that if they're the ones that are solving it, then you're not creating that opening.
Yeah, maybe I think one phenomenon I have observed is I've met a lot of leaders who intellectually understand things, and they see, like, I'm the leader of this organization, and intellectually I understand this. Intellectually, we need to be agile, and many of these leaders stay on a conceptual level all the time. And what they fail with is understanding that in order to, it's not only an intellectual exercise, they also need to actually live it themselves, what they are expecting from people. So this gap of hey, I need to walk the talk, I need to live agility myself, and not just expecting and pushing this into the organization. That I have seen also a number of times, and that has caused a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also the leaders that need to change, and they need the same kind of empowerment, the same kind of training and coaching and so on. They need that as well.
Pete, you've had your hand up for a little bit. What do you want to contribute to this?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that that are kind of curious. One is that, was it Jörg who talked about empowering? I've kind of lost track. Sorry.
That's okay.
That where I've found organizations to be successful is twofold. One is that the managers just kind of set direction and they get out of the way. More importantly, when it comes to Agile, and I'm thinking specifically Scrum, Safe, pick a framework or methodology, remembering that the point of this is to find what works for the teams and not mandating this is the way that we do it and so everybody must comply. That allowing people some leeway to make things work so that they can deliver stuff that they're proud of in a way that suits them. Yeah, I know you've got deliverables. I know that you've got things that you have to get done. I know that I get it. And yet, if you don't stay focused on the teams being flexible and you force everything into the same pigeonholes, that's not really the right word, but you try and force everybody into the same place at the same time, what you're going to get is a whole bunch of really unhappy people, and nothing is really going to be successful.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that fully. I think that we've seen that multiple times where a lot of people don't understand why they're doing a particular methodology. So, it's not one for me to go off and, read a book and saying, oh, I think Scrum is the right thing for my team, but it's a question of actually making them feel like they're part of that decision process and the rationale for it. I think One other thing that Steve had mentioned in his comment was, in the chat box, was that how little time does teams spend talking about the principles and the values when they're learning Scrum, and are they reinforcing those values and principles as they're learning the framework? And I can tell you that I've seen, at least from an Agile coaching perspective, I've seen those training sessions dance so fast past those values and principles that it's no wonder that the team's getting it wrong, and they go down a road there. So, Kathy, you have your hand up as well.
As a coach in my company with several project teams, and one thing I think is most successful, obviously the management has to be on board with the team starting to be Agile, but I've really liked the idea of an Agile coach working with the team for the first 3 to 6 months, along with a new Scrum Master, because I look at Agile like chess. You can learn the moves in 10 minutes, but to really understand what you're doing, you need to practice it. So once the coach works with a Scrum Master and gets the team going for whatever time they're comfortable and ready to go on with Agile, then letting that Scrum Master continue, they have the experience as well as the training.
It almost comes down to like the sports analogy, which is, and I've said this before, I think in the past, which is, you win the Super Bowl and then suddenly do they fire the coaches? Do they let them go? No, because they understand that the game, every time that they address the game, even as simple rules that you have in some sports, take the ball, put it in that goal. They know that the patterns and the different practices that they do require coaching. They require rinse and repeat. They require reflection. There's a lot of things that are in there which are important. Let's see.
I would like to add one thing to that, because I really like this, what you said, Kathy, I think, about coaches and Scrum Masters. And one thing is really Agile. One word, words are so powerful. One word I learned from Bjarte Boxnes is actually, you need to translate things. You should not cascade. So what does that mean? Cascading means I tell you, you all have to do it this way. Yeah? So you cascade it through the organization. And instead of that, we are rather trying to translate. We understand what it is good for, why it is what it is, and we translate it to our context and our situation. And that is exactly what a coach is doing. A coach is helping a team to translate the Agile values in the team's concrete context. and situation and help them thrive with that. So industrializing Agile by cascading stuff will not be working out. You need to translate it, and that's why you need good coaches. And especially, like you said, in the first couple of months of a team when they ramp up until they have really got the idea.
Cool. Steve, what about you?
Yeah, I've not heard it come up yet, but I'd be interested to hear from others as well. But what I've seen challenges with moving from surviving to thriving is organizations are failing to address their organizational or department metrics as well as the team's performance goals and objectives. They think they can just go in and say, hey, we're going to do Scrum now, but they're still measuring them the old way. And when they find out that they're not being rewarded or recognized in meeting their goals, it kind of falls apart and they revert back to their old way. I'd love to hear how other folks have struggled or overcome this.
I've seen that quite a bit. And I think there's more discussions that need to happen, especially in early transformation, about what are we measuring and really setting the goals or the KPIs or whatever your mechanism is for it and setting them correctly so that people understand we're measuring things that we're working on. And I came from a culture and a big Fortune 5 company that unfortunately they would measure their metrics package was like 26 pages of metrics, and I would always get called out on why isn't that metric moving, and I'd have to always give them the same answer. Well, we're not working on that right now. It's not changing right now. So I think there's more discussions that need to take place in that realm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think with that too, and that this could probably lend itself to an entire conversation or podcast, but I do feel that a lot of what the team is working on right now is lagging metrics. And so, when companies are looking at their revenue goals or their engagement goals or whatever it is that they're looking at, those are all leading metrics that help company decide on their portfolio and so forth. But what the teams need to get directly connected to is, the things that they're working on now are probably not going to be seen at the company level for another quarter or two. And so to your point, Ray, I think having those very clear things or goals, missions or goals that the team can attribute their success to and really connect to is really important, because those lagging goals, it's really hard for the teams to connect to those.
Fully agree with that. Scott, what do you have on this?
I think one of the things that is not being done well is helping people understand why they need a coach after spending so much money on certifications, et cetera. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, we send people to programming classes and we don't get a COBOL coach. We expect our people to be able to do these things after they've been trained. So they assume that once they get trained, they don't need any other help. So I don't think they understand what coaches are. And I believe that's true, because when I've seen advertising for coaches in places like LinkedIn and even people who from someplace got my name and they send me, oh, you might be interested in this job. Just like I've seen with Scrum Masters, these requests sound like they want a project manager. So I don't think people understand what coaches are at all, especially what Agile coaches are. Somebody else mentioned the issue of when people do get trained. I agreed with this, that the Agile values and principles are almost not mentioned. I've been places, go in there and I ask people about some things, and after a while I kind of bluntly ask them, when you're training, did you get a chance to talk about these? And some people don't even know what they are. They got their framework training and people figure, oh, okay, that's what we do. And so I think that's another big failure in general of those who are promoting Agile training and certifications and stuff, is they gloss over the values and principles and don't ask people to look at them and consider what it might mean to have to implement these things in their organization.
And those things are very contextual to the organization in question, because I've done as a coach coming in, one of my first things that I have people do is read the 12 principles and tell me whether or not it's hard or impossible to do that here at this company. And I can tell you that there hasn't been a time that I've done that exercise that 6 to 7 of them come out as either hard or impossible to do in the company because of some existing structure that might be, not working. And
yeah, that's one of the things I do in my training. I actually have an exercise, ask people to go through all the values and principles and mark them as how easy or difficult they are. And yeah, about half of them are things that people sort of almost can't envision doing in their organization.
Right. And that's the one beautiful thing about Agile and even just Scrum. It sure does point out all the things that don't work in your company before you even start. So there's a lot of foundational components, I think, sometimes that set teams up for failure that had nothing to do with the framework and had everything to do with structural issues or other impediments within the organization that need to be removed. I've actually told certain teams, and I don't know if other coaches have done this, that you're not ready to implement Scrum yet. You have to go take care of these 3 things. They have to be addressed, or we can't really start. And I think a lot of coaches will be comfortable enough with just delivering the training and I don't know. I don't personally. I don't feel comfortable sending someone down a journey where I know that they're potentially set up for being in that space of not thriving. David, what do you have?
Are we the right people to ask? And the reason I put that in there is because we generally observe, right? We're observing everyone here pretty much has the same concepts and ideas, and I think this is a very good conversation. But I wonder, in some of those surviving places and some of those failing places, if we have thought, or if people here have thought about actually talking to the outside, if you think of the team as the fishbowl, but talking to the experiences of those new people approaching Agile, could be the organization, the enterprise, everything outside them, and ask them what they see, because we've got the answers. We look at the structure, we know what's going on, but if we could take it from their lens and show them why this team isn't working so well, and forget the metrics, it's the actions, it's the behaviors, and those behaviors are obviously affected by, you guys mentioned the performance, the goals, absolutely right. By managers not being able to support them or back them up. There are people, psychology. A lot of these people that work in Agile aren't really not only believers, but they don't want to be there because of their psychology. So these are things I thought that would be enhancing our experience in how to guide organizations by asking those people who really think their teams are failing. We'll certainly see things like RACI, we'll see answers like that. But I think the people, the organization, as someone said earlier, that structural organization is always going to impact you. So ask those people. So if you guys can give me some ideas about that, I think that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem. I wanted to ask one thing, because I saw your comment come through there. My question of this self-reflection of being able to when you're in the system, can you see the system? Can I see what's going on around me? And I'm just curious, what are ways that you step away, as you said, asking others about it, but are there other methods that you use in order to get perspective on your transformation?
Yeah, usually I like one-on-ones. And one of my favorite things is just have personal conversations. I find that's probably, for me personally, is the best way to getting to know the person, making it more friendly, and kind of by doing that, you enable discussion, right? Rather than just saying, hey, I'm a coach, I go there, what's going on here? You have a discussion like you would with a team. You're getting to know these people at every level, and you can ask them what they feel about it, and then you can bring it into the teams. Now, I think that's rather slow, and which we know it's all incremental, it has to be. But if there was another way that we could keep it on a sort of a more friendly level, but if we have something similar where we can bring those people, those outside parties, maybe we know the problems, absolutely, but we want to get their information and see how we can engage with them and factor that into how the teams are playing. And then specifically, I guarantee you, they'll give certain things that, oh, okay, this is why we do this. Because you're taking that action, that is preventing the team from doing X, Y, Z. Now, usually we ask that from the team or the scrum master or the coach to actually go out there and let's call it impediment. Let's say these people are impediments, and we go there to do that, right? Oftentimes that communication is lost. The ability to do that, the ability to go to your manager, the ability to go up to the chain, it doesn't happen. And I have seen that many times. I've seen other times where we've created groups and given them the power to do that. I put survival down, but oftentimes I have seen thriving teams, but mostly I think it's survival. So did that answer your question, or did I go all looping?
No, I think that's perfectly within alignment, because I think people setting perspective, and I do the same thing with one-on-ones and with asking people, how are things going? How am I doing my work? Other things. One thing to just pretense in that thing is be in the right mindset in order to listen, because I've become more self-aware as I've gotten older about the fact that if I'm ready for a conversation or I'm not ready for a conversation, and being able to sit there and say, tell us about how we're doing, and expect that what you might get as an answer might be something that you got to be prepared for. And
absolutely, yeah.
It's,
I'm like you, because a few years ago I just kept jumping in, and I'm learning to hold my breath and listen, and that is a major change in my personality. So over the years I have definitely improved at that. So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and I have as well. And I think it's just I get so excited about certain things that sometimes, and I think all of my co-hosts here can agree that, Ray, you just need to shut up every once in a while. Just every once in a while, Ray. Come on, just give the platform to somebody else. Speaking of that, David, are you there? What do you have on this?
Yeah, there are a few things that I wrote down here, but as far as like listening, right? That's what you just were talking about, and that is definitely something that we out of practice even more often. Many times because the way we've been trained, we want to provide solutions real quick, but many times we have to kind of wait until they finish, because sometimes they give you this extra hint, extra information that you need in order to make an assessment, right? But just to kind of hit the points that you were talking about earlier in relation, like to get buy-in and thrive, you have to get the buy-in from the leadership. As long as you have that support and it's drilled down to the other leadership, that will help. However, whenever you don't have that 100% and it's not being drilled all the way down, like, just to be open to change, open to initiatives, open to do different things, it can be hard, because many people are resistant, right? They're resistant to change. And it's it's understandable, because it creates anxiety and how is this going to change my world? How is this going to change my job? So we have to go back and educate the folks, and also build those relationships, and get a better understanding. So I know some of the tools that I've used in the past, which have helped a little bit. On one side, I used to work for a nonprofit, and we always talk about have a volunteer between a volunteer, right? Where you would have an idea you shared with somebody that has influence, and that person will share with their other peers, right? And then that's how you would get the buy-in, because many times if it comes from you, it may sound like you're trying to impose something, and really that may disable them from listening to you. So I have some things that I work on, and the other thing, the tool that like a lot is the working agreement, because that comes from the inside out, right? You try to get information from the team to be able to better understand them. And it's always great if you were to have something laid out and understand better what they're going through. And especially like you were talking about setting up expectations or setting up goals. And that is another way for the teams to set up their own goals where they feel comfortable and they're going to own those, right? So that's just to wrap it up. I like one of the things that they said earlier about working with the Scrum Masters, 3 to 6 months. I think that's great when you don't have full buy-in from the teams. So that I like that.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, David. And right now, we are at the top of the hour. Just a couple key things to note. Registration is now open for Agile 2022, July 18th to the 22nd over in Nashville. It's going to be in person this year. We're going to be taking some, of course, precautions, of course, with COVID and other things that are there. The other one that's also open right now is XP. I don't have a slide for it, but please go look at that on the agilealliance.org site as well. They are also, I'm not sure if they've closed for their papers yet, but that's also a great event. It's going to be in Copenhagen this year, which will be really nice. The next Agile Coaching Network, the live event will be on February 25th. And thank you all and have a good month. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.